I always knew that my grandson was different from the others. Not in the way a proud mother might boast about her child, nor in the manner people whisper about problem kids. No, Axel Lowell was different in a quiet, almost enigmatic way. It was in the way he observed the world, in his measured, thoughtful speech, and in the way he carried himself, as if he possessed a secret wisdom that everyone else had yet to uncover. His mother, my daughter Callista, never understood him. Callista had been so young when she bore Axel that she felt overwhelmed by life's demands. Fresh out of high school and unprepared for the responsibilities of adulthood, she struggled to find her footing. When she left our small hometown in search of a new life with a new husband, she made a decision that would forever alter both our lives. She left Axel with me, a 10-year-old child, with nothing more than a crumpled letter on the kitchen table explaining that she was simply not ready to raise him. I remember that day clearly. I sat at the table, reading her hurried words with my hands tucked into my worn jeans, trying to hide the sorrow tightening my throat, when I looked up and saw Axel standing quietly in the doorway. Instead of the tears or desperate questions one might expect from a child abandoned, he merely tilted his head and asked in a soft, measured tone, "Will you leave me, Grandma?" It was as though he'd already anticipated my refusal, as if he understood that love, true, enduring love, could never be abandoned so easily. And so I made a promise to him that day. I would never leave him. I had no inkling then of just how vital that promise would be, or how relentlessly he would test it over the years. Axel grew up as a silent observer. Not shy, mind you, he was never timid, but remarkably observant in a way that set him apart from the other children. While most kids filled quiet moments with chatter or laughter, Axel preferred to watch. He absorbed every detail around him: the play of light on leaves in the park, the subtle changes in a neighbor's tone as they passed by, the quiet shifts in our daily routines. At school, his teachers often remarked that he was mature beyond his years. Over time, however, their tone shifted. They began labeling him aloof or even cold, as though his introspection were a barrier rather than a gift. I knew better. Axel wasn't detached at all. He was simply waiting. Waiting for something he could neither name nor fully understand. Perhaps the return of his mother, perhaps the inevitable rejection he feared so deeply, or perhaps something else entirely. By the time Axel turned 17, that quiet intensity had transformed into a confident, if inscrutable, presence. He had grown tall and lean, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell over his eyes despite my constant requests for him to keep it trimmed. Axel wasn't what anyone would call a delinquent. He never fell in with the wrong crowd, never indulged in vices like drinking or smoking. Yet there was something in him, an almost feral spark that flared unexpectedly in his eyes, a restless energy that he could not easily contain. Sometimes I caught him watching me not with the gentle warmth expected from a loving grandson, but with a look that was both penetrating and challenging, as if he were studying me, waiting for me to reveal a truth I had long kept hidden. One fateful night, I awoke in the stillness of our modest home. I had been drifting in and out of a troubled sleep when I noticed a shadow at the bedroom door. At first, I assumed it was a trick of the darkness, but then I realized it was Axel. He had slipped in silently, almost ghost-like, and stood in the doorway with his head bowed slightly. I gathered enough courage to whisper, "Axel?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he only shook his head, a subtle motion that reminded me of that long-ago day when his calm demeanor belied a depth of understanding beyond his years. Finally, in a voice that trembled with suppressed emotion, he said, "You never ask what I feel." His words sent a chill through me. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "You never ask if I'm angry," he replied softly, almost accusingly. I swallowed hard, and then dared to ask, "And are you angry?" There was a long pause before he answered. No, with that, he turned and left the room, leaving my heart pounding in the silent darkness. After that night, things between us began to change in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Axel started drawing closer, his once distant gaze now lingering in mine far too long, his quiet attentiveness shifting into something I couldn't quite decipher. One afternoon, While I was washing dishes in our small kitchen, I felt his presence behind me. He murmured, "You're afraid of me," so softly that I almost thought I had imagined it. I protested, my voice faltering, but he only smiled and whispered, "You're lying." His words, uttered so intimately that I felt the warmth of his breath against my ear, sent a tremor through me. It was as if that brief, charged moment had opened a door to something both forbidden and inevitable. In the days that followed, I found myself increasingly conflicted. I began to avoid him, retreating to different rooms whenever I sensed his approach. Yet Axel was relentless. His presence was like a magnet that would not be denied. One evening, he knocked on my bedroom door. "Grandma." His voice resonated with a mixture of authority and vulnerability that unsettled me deeply. I ordered him to go to bed, trying to enforce the boundaries I had so carefully maintained, but he replied softly, "You never said stop." After a pause, he left, and even though I tried to convince myself that his behavior was merely a phase, I knew deep inside that this was far from a simple adolescent rebellion. Morning came, and Axel was nowhere to be found. He had vanished without a word of explanation, leaving the house echoing with a profound silence. I sat at the kitchen table, cradling my lukewarm coffee, feeling an overwhelming sense of emptiness that I couldn't quite put into words. Days turned into weeks, and while I attempted to tell myself that his absence was for the best, every night I lay awake listening for the sound of footsteps that were no longer there. Then, one day, my phone rang unexpectedly. The caller ID displayed a name I recognized immediately, Axel. His voice, though changed by the passage of time, carried the same soft insistence I remembered from years past. "Did you miss me?" he asked, almost teasingly. I could barely manage a reply as I asked, "Where are you?" His answer was simple, "Close by." He said he would visit. In that moment, I knew I should have shut the door and hidden away from the complicated emotions his return would evoke, yet something in me, some long-dormant hope, compelled me to wait. That very night at midnight, I heard a soft knock at the door. With trembling hands, I opened it, and there he stood, Axel, older now, his face marked by the passage of time, yet still bearing that unmistakable intensity. "I told you I'd come back," he said with a faint, enigmatic smile that was both reassuring and unsettling. I found myself unable to object as he stepped inside. That night, sleep was a distant memory. Axel sat in the living room, his calm presence infusing the space with an air of inevitability, as if nothing had changed despite all that had transpired. At one point, our hands brushed accidentally, a fleeting, almost accidental touch that sparked a current between us. I felt a jolt, a burst of energy that coursed through me, and neither of us pulled away. The tension in the room grew, thick and palpable, until it seemed as if the very air vibrated with the unspoken longing and regret of years gone by. He extended his hand deliberately, placing it against my wrist in a gesture that was tender yet charged with an intensity that belied its simplicity. I did not recoil. In that single moment, I felt as though an invisible line had been crossed, a line that marked both an ending and a beginning. Afterwards, I attempted to send him away, convinced that this dangerous closeness could only lead to heartbreak. Yet Axel left silently, his departure as understated as his arrival. I knew, though, that no matter how hard I tried to push him away, his waiting was relentless. It was as if his very existence depended on the promise I had once made so long ago, a promise I had vowed to keep, even when I struggled to understand its true meaning. In the weeks that followed, our lives became a delicate dance of avoidance and inevitable encounter. I found myself haunted by every creak of the floorboard, every subtle knock on a door. The quiet of the night became a canvas upon which my imagination painted Axel's persistent presence. I began to see shadows where there were none, and in the deep silence before dawn, I sometimes swore I could hear his footsteps pacing just outside my door. It was as though our home had become a stage for an endless play of longing, regret, and unspoken promises, a constant reminder of what had been lost and what might yet be regained. One crisp autumn morning, as the first golden leaves began to fall, I awoke to an eerie stillness. Axel had not returned. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the untouched mug of coffee growing cold in my hands, and I felt an overwhelming void, a gaping absence that left me questioning everything. Was his departure a sign that I had finally reclaimed some semblance of peace? Or was it merely a temporary absence before the inevitable return of the one person who had haunted my every thought? Deep down, I knew that Axel's presence was now an inseparable part of me, a constant reminder of a promise made in a moment of desperate hope. Days turned into weeks, and although the house slowly settled back into its routine, there was always an undercurrent of tension, a quiet murmur in the silence that spoke of unfulfilled longing. Then, one evening, the phone rang again. "Did you miss me?" Axel's voice came through, soft and insistent. My heart pounded as I whispered, "Where are you?" After a pause that stretched on forever, he answered, "I'm here." In that moment, as I listened to his familiar tone, I realized that the time for running away was over. I knew that soon the door would open once more, and I would have to face the man who had grown from the quiet child I once knew into a young man whose presence filled every corner of my soul, true to his word. As midnight approached, I heard a gentle knock at the door. With trepidation and a fierce longing that I could no longer deny, I opened it to find Axel standing there once again, older, more determined, and carrying an intensity that made the air between us shimmer with possibility. "I told you I'd come back," he repeated, his voice steady and sure. In that moment, I realized that his return was not a betrayal of our past, but an affirmation of a truth I had long resisted. That night, we sat together in the dim glow of the living room lamp. The silence between us was no longer heavy with distance. It was filled with the unspoken confessions of years spent apart. Every glance, every gentle touch, conveyed more than words ever could. As the night deepened, Axel reached out once more, his hand finding mine. I allowed myself to linger in that touch, to let the connection wash over me. In that electric moment, the boundary between promise and destiny blurred. It was both the end of a long, agonizing wait and the beginning of something that neither of us could fully articulate, a merging of past regrets and the hope for a future rewritten. In the days that followed, our interactions became a series of quiet meetings and subtle signals. Sometimes, Axel would leave a note on the kitchen table, a small, handwritten message in a careful script that said things like, "I am here," or "I remember our promise." Other times, he would simply stand in the doorway with his eyes full of questions and answers that I could only guess at. With each passing day, I found myself torn between the comfort of familiar routines and the disruptive pull of this newfound closeness. There were moments when I attempted to explain to myself that what we shared was not truly intimate in the conventional sense. It was not about physical desire alone, but about a deep-seated need to be understood, to be accepted after a lifetime of solitude and unspoken pain. Axel's presence stirred something inside me, a mix of maternal tenderness, guilt, and a longing for redemption that I had long suppressed. His gentle questioning and unyielding gaze made me confront memories I had buried. The day Callista left, the countless nights I sat alone waiting for a voice that never came, and the silent promise I had made to never let him go. As summer turned to autumn once again, our interactions grew bolder. One crisp evening, as dusk settled over our small town, Axel and I sat on the back porch watching the sky transform into shades of deep indigo and violet. The silence between us was comfortable, yet charged with a quiet intensity. Axel's gaze was fixed on the horizon, but every so often his eyes flickered to me, as if searching for confirmation that I was still there, still present. Finally, he spoke in a low, measured tone. "Grandma, have you ever wondered if the promise we made could change everything?" I looked at him, struck by the depth in his eyes, and realized that the promise was not just an obligation. It was a lifeline that bound us together in the face of life's unrelenting uncertainties. In the weeks that followed, I gradually began to accept the reality that our relationship was transforming into something neither of us had anticipated or envisioned. It was not a blatant intimacy fueled by lust or a rebellious spirit. Instead, it was a quiet, almost sacred bond that had blossomed over years of patient waiting and unspoken understanding. We found ourselves sharing the simplest of moments, such as enjoying a warm cup of tea together on a rainy morning, taking a silent stroll in the park beneath a canopy of falling leaves, or listening to the soft rustle of paper as Axel read aloud from one of his many journals. Each of these moments, though subtle and seemingly ordinary, was imbued with profound meaning, serving as a reaffirmation that the promise I had made remained vibrant and alive, continuously binding us together in a way that felt both comforting and profound. However, with this deepening closeness came its own unique set of challenges and complexities. There were nights when I lay wide awake, haunted by the intensity of our connection and the weighty implications it carried for both of us. I found myself questioning whether the bond we shared, one forged in the crucible of loss and longing, could ever truly be liberated from the painful past that had shaped our lives. In the stillness of the early morning hours, I often pondered whether I was holding on to Axel out of genuine affection or out of a desperate need to fill the aching void left by Callista's absence. Yet, as I caught glimpses of his earnest eyes or heard the sound of his gentle laughter echoing through the hallways of our home, I realized that our connection transcended simple labels and definitions. It was a quiet revolution of the heart, a testament to the enduring power of promises made during the darkest of times, a reminder that love can emerge from the ashes of sorrow. There were also moments of conflict and turmoil. Occasionally, I found myself feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of Axel's presence, as if he embodied both a cherished reminder of a long-lost past and a challenge to everything I had previously understood about love and duty. In those moments, I would sometimes retreat into solitude, convincing myself that distance was necessary to preserve my own sense of identity and self. Yet, every time I attempted to close the door on those feelings, Axel's gentle persistence would find a way back in, a soft knock at midnight, a whispered "I'm here" echoing in the dark corridors of our home. And with each of those gentle reminders, I came to the realization that our bond was not something to be feared or suppressed, but rather something to be embraced as an integral part of our shared history, a history rich with both pain and healing. As the seasons turned once more, our lives began to settle into a new rhythm, a delicate balance between the sorrow of what had been lost and the fragile hope of what might still be redeemed. In those quiet moments of reflection, I would often think back on the years of waiting and wonder if I had, in some small way, become a prisoner of my own promise. Yet every time I looked into Axel's eyes, I saw not a burden to bear, but a spark of life and possibility, a living reminder that even in the midst of heartbreak, the human spirit could find solace and strength in connection. It was a powerful realization that illuminated the path forward, even when the shadows of our past loomed large now. Whenever I hear the soft knock at the door or feel the gentle creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, I no longer feel the urge to run away or retreat. Instead, I open the door willingly, fully aware that Axel's return is an undeniable part of the truth I can no longer deny or ignore. Deep within me, I have come to understand that I too have been waiting all these years, a waiting filled with quiet hope, lingering sorrow, and an unspoken longing for redemption and healing. In Axel's unwavering gaze, I finally see the promise I once made shining back at me, a beacon of light illuminating a life that has long been overshadowed by loss and heartache. Today, as I sit by the window watching the sun dip below the horizon and cast its warm, amber hues across the sprawling sky, I am acutely aware that our journey is far from over. The road that lies ahead remains uncertain and riddled with challenges, its twists and turns shrouded in the mists of an unknown future. The echoes of our past, memories of hardship, resilience, and moments of bittersweet joy, still whisper through the silent halls of our home, gently reminding us of the trials we have bravely faced. Yet, with every soft smile that we exchange and every tender, unspoken gesture that passes between us, I find solace in the delicate balance of our shared existence. In the quiet, unadorned language of our hearts, in every word left unsaid, and every gentle touch that bridges our separate souls, lies the unyielding truth that love endures. Love endures even when it is shaped by sorrow, transformed by the inexorable passage of time and forged in the crucible of promises that we have made, promises that refuse to be forgotten or cast aside. And so, I continue to live alongside Axel, learning each day that the most profound connections are often not born out of grand declarations or dramatic, sweeping gestures. Instead, they emerge in the quiet moments of understanding that pass silently between two souls who have both known the sting of abandonment and the fragile glimmer of hope. Our story is one of waiting through long, endless nights of solitude that stretch on like an unbroken line of stars in a dark sky, and ultimately of discovering that, in the act of opening one's heart, even when it has been battered and bruised by loss, one may uncover a radiant light that guides the way forward. This light, subtle yet persistent, illuminates the path to healing and slowly mends the fissures that time and hardship have carved into our lives. I have come to understand that intimacy is not always characterized by overt passion or reckless abandon. More often than not, it is discovered in the soft, delicate spaces that exist between heartbeats, in the silent assurances that are offered by a steady, unwavering presence, and in the slow, deliberate healing that unfolds when one dares to trust again, even after experiencing profound hurt. Axel's return, with all of its quiet intensity, measured longing, and unspoken determination, has become the living embodiment of that truth. It serves as a powerful reminder that even in a world marked by separation, regret, and the weight of past experiences, there remains the possibility for reconciliation, renewal, and the reawakening of a love that, despite all odds and challenges, endures and even flourishes against the backdrop of life's uncertainties. This love, unexpected and tender, possesses the remarkable power to heal the deepest wounds and transform our lives in ways we have yet to fully comprehend, revealing layers of connection that we might not have realized were possible. Each time I open the door and welcome Axel back into the space we share, I am reminded that our lives are defined not solely by the wounds of our past, but by the courage we muster to face each new day with hope, resilience, and an unwavering belief in the future. The act of opening that door is symbolic, a deliberate choice to embrace the future with open arms, despite the lingering shadows of what has been and the uncertainties that may lie ahead. In that quiet courage, in every whispered word and every gentle touch that passes between us, I find the promise of redemption. This promise assures me that no matter how long we may have waited, the future still holds within it the potential for healing and the discovery of a love that is as enduring as it is unexpected, capable of blossoming in the most unlikely of circumstances. I end the gentle unfolding of our days. I have come to treasure the small rituals that mark our renewed bond, each moment serving as a testament to the strength of our connection. We now share long, thoughtful conversations over cups of tea that steam in the early morning chill, discussing not only our memories but also our hopes for what may come, weaving dreams into the fabric of our shared reality. The sound of our voices, sometimes soft, sometimes resolute, fills the quiet corners of the house with a new kind of energy, one that speaks of mutual understanding, deep empathy, and the courage to rebuild what was once fractured. Evening walks beneath a sky dappled with twilight stars have become a sanctuary where we both unburden our hearts, finding solace in the simple act of companionship and the comforting presence of one another. Each step we take together feels like a deliberate act of defiance against the isolation that once threatened to consume us, a testament to our commitment to face the world side by side. As I reflect further on our journey, I see that it is not simply about healing old wounds, but about rediscovering ourselves through the lens of shared vulnerability and openness. It is in the tender moments, when our eyes meet in a silent exchange of unspoken truths, when a gentle brush of a hand speaks louder than any grand proclamation, that I find strength and reassurance. I am learning to appreciate that the process of healing is gradual, filled with both setbacks and breakthroughs, moments of joy interspersed with challenges. Every new day offers a chance to rewrite the narrative of our past, transforming pain into a bridge toward a more compassionate future, one where understanding and forgiveness pave the way for deeper connection. I now embrace the idea that our shared path is enriched by both joy and sorrow, each moment contributing to the complex tapestry of our lives, creating a narrative that is uniquely ours. The promise of our connection is not just a memory of what once was, but a living, breathing commitment to nurture hope and resilience, to cultivate a space where love can thrive. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world is hushed and the weight of yesterday seems to dissipate, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to love again, for the opportunity to find beauty in unexpected places, and for the realization that even the smallest gestures of kindness can pave the way toward profound transformation, igniting sparks of joy in the most mundane of moments. Thus, as the golden hues of sunset give way to the deep blues of twilight, I sit by the window with a heart full of cautious optimism and a spirit open to the possibilities that lie ahead. I welcome Axel's presence not as a remnant of a painful past, but as a beacon lighting the way to a future where our intertwined lives offer redemption, healing, and the promise of a love that endures and evolves. In every whispered word, every tender touch, and every shared moment of quiet reflection, I see the possibility of a tomorrow that is brighter than today, a tomorrow where the scars of old wounds serve as reminders of our strength, resilience, and growth, and where the gentle persistence of love triumphs over the shadows of despair, illuminating even the darkest corners of our hearts.